There's always one period of the year where in almost every newspaper you can find someone talking about recession. And the question we should ask ourselves is, what is recession and why does everyone fear it? First of all, let's explain recession in two basic points. The first point is that recession is a decrease in the GDP, the gross domestic product. The second point is that when recession occurs, there's an increase in the unemployment rate. So the GDP goes down and unemployment goes up. These are the two key factors that helps determine that it's a recession. The correlation between the growth in unemployment and the decrease in GDP has been demonstrated by the Okun's law, which has demonstrated that at the 1% increase in the unemployment rate corresponds generally and about 2% decrease in the GDP. For how long does the GDP have to go down? Generally, it's accepted that to say that it's a recession, the GDP has to go down for 2 quarters. So for 6 months, the GDP growth rates are published on a quarterly basis, so every 3 months. Some people are able to say before the 6 months, between the 4th and the 6th month, if it's a recession, because in the middle of the quarter, other data, important economic data indicators are released, like the CPI, Consumer Price Index indicators, and inflation indicator, a very important one, and the non-farm payrolls, which is an employment indicator. Remember that to solve problems, we have to see the causes of those problems. The origins, where do they come from? Because since recession is not a good thing, we don't want the GDP to go down, we don't want the unemployment rate to go up. We want to solve it, but to solve it, we have to understand it. The 3 main causes of a recession are high interest rates. Why high interest rates? Well, what are interest rates? Interest rates are also called the cost of borrowing money. So, if I borrow money from somebody else, I have to give them back an extra amount of money for the time I've kept their money because they didn't have it. They could have done all the things they wanted, but they gave it to me. So I have to give something more. That more of money that I have to give back is generally the interest rates. It was the bank, more simply, that will happen to you every time you do it. If you have a bank account, the money you put in the bank account, just because you give it to the bank is going to give you an interest rate on that. If interest rates are very up, let's take this example of the bank, you have a kind of an incentive to leave the money in the bank. Why? Well, because you're making money on that. Because everything else is just an expense and a risk. You have, for a low risk, a moderate reward that you can consider. What this generates is a lack of liquidity in the markets, because institutions, banks, governments, and people, consumers, are trying to save as much as possible. So they're not spending, consumption goes down. Remember the negative correlation between investments and interest rates. The more interest rates go up, the less investment there will be. The lower the interest rates, the higher the investments. But the higher the investments means more means of production are required to produce more, and so more people need to get hired. And so the economy grows. If investment is low, the economy is going to be low. This brings to the second point, which is the attitude of the consumer matters, because the second point is the consumer confidence in the economy. If the consumer fears that the economy is going to is gonna go down. The things are gonna go worse and worse. They're gonna save as much as possible. They're gonna spend less. And this, what is this going to cause? A decrease in consumption will cause a decrease in demand, so a decrease in production, but a decrease in production will cause less people needed to produce those goods, because they will need less goods, and so less people to produce them. So less people will be employed, unemployment goes up, and the people who work are remunerated less. Which brings me to the third point, which is lower real salaries. What are real salaries? Real salaries are the ratio between the salary someone earns, the amount of money, let's say $1,000, over the amount of goods that amount of money buys. Because that's correlated with inflation and a lot of other things. Because if the real salary goes down, which means it can happen in two ways. Number one, the nominal salary goes down. Number two, the price of goods goes up. And scenario number three is the salary goes down and the cost of goods goes up. That's the most dramatic one. But when people have less real money, they can purchase less things, they can put less food on the table, they're going to try to save more, they're going to spend less. And so this is going to slow the economy again. So depending on the schools of thought, of economic thought, we have different theses on how to solve it. The classical economists will sustain that the main causes of a recession are high interest rates. They suggest, obviously, to lower interest rates, so to make them lower in order to increase the liquidity in the markets and to make people and institutions able to purchase more goods and services in order to boost employment. And so since more people have jobs, more people earn more money, they're going to spend more goods are going to be demanded and so produced, and so this cycle, virtuous circle is going to continue. They also suggest to finance that the government should finance that through debt more than taxes. The second school of thought is the Keynesian one. That takes its name from John Maynard Keynes, the famous, notoriously famous English economist. They say that they almost forget the interest rates part, and they say that the biggest cause of an economic recession is the lower real salary and also consumer confidence, but the lower real salary most of all. And so they suggest to increase the salary, and the biggest thing they suggest is to increase public expenditure. And the best way to do it is to increase taxes, following their school of thought. How to increase taxes? Well, following their school of thought, trying to organize a redistribution of wealth, because those who are going to suffer the most from a recession are going to be the poorest, so you're going to tax more the rich. That's what they say. It's important to say, also to remember that in a globalized world, if an important economy goes in a recession, since a bigger part of the GDP of a country is involved in and comes from international trade, that's going to have an impact on other countries, and that might cause a global recession.